Hello, welcome to another Will Radio. This is part 17, doing more things to improve my mood. Well, that's not the right day. It's not December 24th. It's December 29th. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm starting to catch another cold. I just got over a cold a few weeks ago. So, I apologize if my voice is a bit rough. Okay. I just wanted to talk about, I guess it's the end of the year, right? So it's a time of reflection for me. Try to reflect a few times a year. But, I have been reflecting for a little bit now. Kind of, am I doing the sorts of things I want to do? And I would say for the most part, yes, but I want to do more. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means and what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do. Now, some of these things are work adjacent. I'm not really talking about, my work. I'm talking about other things. The work is becoming increasingly interesting, actually. But I'm sort of keeping that separate. I want to talk about the things outside of, traditional work. So I figured, let me start with why I stopped, or when I stopped watching television. I grew up watching lots of television, lots of movies, and, going to Blockbuster, going to video stores before Blockbuster. So there's watching movies also. I love movies. Television less so, but I absolutely love movies. And there was a certain time where I stopped watching television, and I haven't really gone back. I've watched a couple shows since I stopped TV, but, I don't watch television. I don't turn on a television and browse the channels. That's something I haven't done in, at least 15 years. More than that, probably. And the reason is, when I was working with Dan on the Reason Schemer, we had Ken Shan and Oleg Kiselyov come out and visit Bloomington. And I was talking with them at a restaurant one day in Bloomington, and I mentioned some little factoid that had to do with Bloomington. Doesn't really matter what it is. And they didn't understand what I was talking about. I made a reference to a television commercial that had a connection to Bloomington, and they didn't understand. And then finally they went, wait, you mean like on television? And at that moment I was enlightened. It was like, oh, that's how they get so much done. They're not watching television all the time. At the time, I was a grad student, I was a PhD student, and, I was working pretty hard. I was super motivated because I was going back to school. I was older, and I really wanted to learn Scheme and all that. And I didn't find grad school easy for the most part. I found it very challenging. And I would come home to my apartment. I was just wiped. And I would, just kind of lay on the couch, turn on the television. And, I didn't even have, I guess I had like very basic cable or whatever. I was trying to save money and all that. And it would have, what would be on the History Channel. And I guess before they got into aliens, it was all World War II stuff. So it would be, Panzers of the Wehrmacht Part 17. And it'd be almost all commercials. And it would have, 5 minutes of stock footage with some voiceover. That was the sort of thing that I could get on these channels. And I was tired, and I would just turn on the TV and just kind of, I don't know if I would even call it relaxing. I was done with thinking. And the next thing I'd know, it was like 2 a.m. Okay. And I had just had commercials on and, stock footage with voiceovers. And I just felt like exhausted. And I did that night after night. And, it reminded me of a David Foster Wallace essay where he talks about, television as like an addiction, like the sorts of things that people are addicted to, drugs and alcohol and gambling. So anyway, hearing Ken and Oleg say this, and they start laughing. They're like, "What? We don't have time to watch TV, and if we did, we wouldn't do something else instead." It was like, okay, I need to get rid of this thing. And from that point on, it's like, yeah, sure, I would watch a movie, but that would be different. That would be like, I am going to watch a movie. I feel like watching a movie. Let's do it. Okay. Or either I would go out and see a movie, or I would, have a DVD or something. But it became much more intentional. It wasn't, well, I don't have anything to do right now. So I'll just enter this quiescent state and then turn on some channel, TV for, 4 or 5 hours. So I stopped doing that. And I think that was really important. That was important to me. Now, on the other hand, the internet is much worse than television in terms of being addictive. Like YouTube in particular. I mean, you're probably watching this on YouTube. YouTube's 100 times more addictive than television because they're legitimately interesting, fascinating, educational things. And if you're like me and you're just interested in everything, YouTube, it's like the Encyclopedia Britannica times 1,000. It's just fascinating. And I'm trying to learn Japanese, and there's like infinite amount of people walking around Japan speaking Japanese with Japanese subtitles, right? And it's like, okay. And I do watch some of that every day. That's important for learning Japanese, but and also learning Japanese culture, which I'm interested in. But on the other hand, even though there are lots of interesting things to see and do, at some point I can get into kind of, it's not exactly the doom scrolling mindset, but I can say, okay, I've been on YouTube for, I don't even remember how long now. And I watched some interesting videos. At this point, do I need to watch yet another video of a helicopter landing on an oil platform in the North Sea? Okay. That was interesting. It was very interesting. However, do I need to watch 20 of those videos? I don't know. Like, it's okay to binge them some, but at some point I'm like, okay, I'm not doing something else. Okay. It's enough YouTube time for now. It's time to do something else. So, that's something I've struggled with. And it's the same sort of thing. It's like, okay. And I have friends who've told me that they have the same issue, including researchers. It's like, okay, they spend all day watching YouTube videos. And I understand because I also, I love YouTube. I mean, I don't love the Google part of YouTube or whatever. I'm not talking about it as a corporate entity, but I love, as someone who's just interested in the world, having access to that. But it's like more dangerous than TV in some ways, because I can just spend all day, watching about whatever. And if I'm not careful with that will replace my actually doing things. And it also, I think, really affects my mood in the same way that watching, German panzers, Part 17 until 4 a.m. would affect my mood. I'd just be exhausted the next day. I'm like, what did I do? It wasn't something that was getting me excited. And if I was really that tired, well, go to sleep, take a nap, do something, and then wake up and do something. Once you're refreshed or excited, or switch, do something completely different. I don't know, draw or something, make music or something like that, whatever it is. Don't just sit in front of a screen and stare at it and not do anything else. There's only a certain amount of time in a day that I should be doing that, is how I feel at some level. That's not to say that this isn't quite addictive. It is. But that's something where it's obviously connected to mood. If I'm feeling down or unmotivated or whatever, I'm much more likely, or sick, like right now, I'll get a cold. It's easy for me to just sit there and watch YouTube or whatever it is, Crunchyroll. YouTube's way more addictive than Crunchyroll for me. Crunchyroll's like an anime streaming service. I think YouTube's like the ultimate in addictive thing for me. So anyway, I think that's sort of the replacement for TV and for movies for the most part. I don't watch very many movies anymore. Partly because if I go to a movie theater, like I saw with my family, the new Bob Dylan, biopic thingy, and literally we sat through 30 minutes of commercials, drug commercials, car commercials, and then all of the trailers were for like Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. It's like, these are people going to see Bob Dylan, so that it's just become outrageous. Like, I would always show up to the movies late to try to skip that, but now you have to show up, like 20 minutes after the movie's scheduled to begin to have a chance to miss most of those. It's really obnoxious. Anyway, but yeah, those movies and TV, it's replaced with basically YouTube. So I think that, I'm very much like Sherlock Holmes, the character of Sherlock Holmes, who is either, on the case and doing something and super stimulated and excited, or, listless. Now, he would take morphine or whatever. I think he did morphine. He did some sort of depressant. So fortunately, I don't have a substance abuse problem like Sherlock Holmes had, but YouTube is kind of the my thing is I'll just sit there and watch YouTube. I mean, I'm not really trying to blame YouTube. I could get in this state before YouTube existed. But the point is, it's easy for me to do some stuff, but then not, just be in a quiescent state, I'll call it, the rest of the time. I'm just kind of, okay, whatever. And so I felt recently like I need to bootstrap myself more. And somewhere I read a quote, it may have been a Hacker News comment, something like that. It was from someone famous, I guess. And the quote was something along the lines of, if you want to improve your mood, do more. That's not the exact quote. And I asked ChatGPT like what quote it was, and it gave me some alternative things that definitely weren't the same. But it was something like that, is that, if you want to, get beyond just worrying about stuff or indulging in YouTube or TV or movies or whatever it is, just do more. And also there's like a amount of guilt. Like, I have a lot of books, for example, and I bought a lot of musical instruments over the years, and I'll look and it's like, oh, here's a stack of books that I'm not reading. There's like some guilt there. It's like, man, so I can feel that, or I can just do something. Okay. Those books serve a purpose. There's the reason I bought those books. It means I'm excited about something. I want to learn about something. Same with those instruments. So instead, how about I do more and I bootstrap myself into doing more. So one of the things that I'm working on is making videos again. So, I hadn't made that many videos recently. And, I've mentioned this before. There was this noise issue where, when you're living around other people, have to be cognizant of that. But I think I've arranged something. I think I've come to an agreement where, I can make some videos. Now, it's true that when I was making 3 or 4 videos in a day, that probably was kind of obnoxious. But, if I want to work on the book some and make a video about that, that doesn't seem, obnoxious. I do Zoom calls. So it's the same sort of thing, right? It's just me talking. I guess I talk more if I'm watching a video than on a Zoom call. But if I'm writing, I don't necessarily talk that much. I mean, whatever. So I think I'd be able to make a lot more videos. Now, originally at the beginning of this year, I was going to make a kilotube, 1024 videos. And obviously, I'm not going to do that this year. I won't end up with 1024 unless I, started making 20-second shorts or something just to hit that number. But that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to make 1024. The point was to get me unstuck, right? It's like the definition of intelligent behavior by Minsky, which is the ability to get unstuck. I was stuck. I wasn't making videos very often. And every time I did need to make a video, I had to figure out how to do it again. And I didn't have very good equipment set up. And, it ended up being the super stressful thing. And I would do 70 takes, and then throw it away. And that was no good. So I had to figure out how to bootstrap myself into being able to make videos. And that meant, getting over, first of all, doing it enough where I felt, I figured out the mechanics of it. And then secondly, getting past any sort of anxiety. So, for this one, I just actually, I didn't even know I was going to make a Will Radio video until a few minutes ago. I was like, yeah, I'm going to make some other videos today. That's my plan. But it's like, I've been thinking about this stuff. Seems like a good time for Will Radio to talk about it. So making videos, I should be able to make more. I'd like to make at least a video a day. Now, there'll be times I'm traveling or things like that where that may not be possible. But, like with weekends, that type of thing, I could make a Will Radio and work on the book or something like that. So, probably on average comes out to at least one a day. So that'd be 365. This year is going to end up being a little over 120 videos, I think. Maybe 125. Maybe 130. Somewhere around there. So if I get, if I do 365, that's a fair number of videos. I think one a day is a good pace. Who knows? We'll see. Okay, working on the Relational Interpeters book, right? I kept wonking about how I wanted to write a book. And that was another example of me getting unstuck. So trying to write 11 books at once, that was an attempt to get unstuck and getting a fancy keyboard and all that stuff. I think I overdid all these things, but that's okay. The main thing is I did get unstuck, and I'm working on this book. And working on a bunch of books, 11 books, made me think very hard about what I actually want to write. It's like, well, most of those 11 books are not the books that absolutely, have to come out of me, at least not right now. The Relational Interpeters book, yes, that's a book I've wanted to write for a very long time. It's about something that I know really well. It doesn't exist. I want people to be excited about it the way I am. I want people to be able to talk to me about it and to be able to figure out things that I haven't figured out or other people in the miniKanren community haven't figured out. Bring in new ideas, bring in new people. So that's something I really care about. And also I think I had gotten too fancy, trying to spend countless hours on like the title page and on jokes and funny quotes and stuff. I think, let me just get a complete first draft. And if it ends up being a very serviceable book where it's just like, okay, here's how you write a relational interpreter. It's not fancy. There you go. It's like a markdown file. Yeah, that's fine. No problem. I can punch it up if I want to later, but maybe that's the sort of book it ends up being, is just a very functional book. The relational interpreters themselves are so interesting that I consider that a work of art. It's like really beautiful. It's like fractals. Okay, sure, you can put some pictures of fractals in your book, but the interesting part of a book is that the fractals are interesting. Like, that's just fascinating. So you don't have to really punch it up. Okay, so what else do I want to do? Kind of bootstrapping myself out of this malaise. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate the degree of malaise, but the point is, I think I can be doing significantly more. And as long as I'm alternating the types of things I do, I don't have to do everything every day. I think that's probably, I don't want to chew off too much, but, it's okay to rest some. It's okay to change up what I'm doing. And I certainly can be doing more than I am. And I actually find, energy-wise, if I'm doing more, I have more energy. It's not, I lack energy when I'm not doing things. Okay, it's not that like I'm too tired because I did a bunch of stuff. No, that's not it. If I'm tired because I did a bunch of stuff, then great. I feel like resting, and then okay, get up and do some more. I'm motivated. It's like when I'm not doing stuff. It's when I'm not, don't have energy or excitement. So, I want to play around with the music. Now, like I mentioned, I've had a bunch of instruments. I've got guitars. I've made guitars. I've designed guitars to be made. All sorts of things. I don't know how to play guitar. Not really. I've taken lessons. But I never got very far. Same with keyboards, synthesizers, drum kit, like drum pads. I think part of it was like with guitar is an interesting instrument. At the same time, I'm trying to learn like what a chord is and what the tunings and what do you call it? The keys and all this stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know anything about music theory. I mean, I know a little bit now, but I didn't know what a melody was until a couple weeks ago. I'm not even sure I know exactly what a melody is, but I just didn't know any of that stuff. And so here I am trying to, as I learned classical guitar first. That was my first lessons. It's like I have to grow out the fingernails on my right hand, right? Because you don't play with a pick, and you have to be able to roll. And I have to cut the fingernails on my left hand really short. And then, when I was playing electric guitar, okay, now you get calluses on your left hand and, stuff like that. It's like, all right, you just have to do a certain amount. It's like rock climbing. When I was rock climbing, okay, if I took a break, the next time I climb, I'd be so sore that I could barely move. So it was like, okay, it's the rock climbing. It's the sort of thing I either do, several times a week to improve, probably need to do at least 3 times a week to get better. Or I just like didn't want to do it because, it's like guitar, like picking up electric guitar every once in a while. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have calluses. This is going to suck. Anyway, I think I was just trying to learn too many things at once. And if I had been completely obsessed with learning guitar, it'd been no problem. Plenty of people have learned guitar, just picked it up. But that wasn't me. It was more like, I want to know, what is a chord? What is a key? What when you're talking about a melody, what does that mean? When you're talking about the beat, I still don't know, like the time signature stuff. I still don't know 4/4 versus 2/2 and stuff like that. I don't really understand that. I've asked, a bunch of people, and, I find that very confusing still. So, one thing that my brother, who's interested in electronic music and all sorts of other music, but he got me into these digital audio workstation stuff, the DAWs, so I got Logic Pro for my Mac, and a bunch of like virtual instrument plugins, VSTs or whatever. I have some of those, so you get different sounds. Didn't really know how to use it because actually Logic Pro is super complicated. It's a very, very powerful system. But then I found, just poking around YouTube videos trying to figure out what in the world, how to use this thing. I found a YouTube channel by Alex Rome, and he had some interesting videos on music production where it's like, okay, open up the DAW, start drawing these notes. This is a chord. This is another chord. This is a chord progression. Here's how you make the chords sound more interesting. That kind of thing, which is like, okay, now you have a song, or at least the beginning of a song. So it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of like a Dan Friedman type approach where it's like, okay, you want to write an interpreter? Let me show you how to write an interpreter. Okay, now you can start riffing on it. So I really like that. And so that's one of the things I'm going to do is start up my DAW each day and just noodle around and play with it. Now, I don't know how to use it very well. I found like an 11-hour course or something on Logic Pro. That looked pretty good, but that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to have to spend 11 hours learning about every button and feature of Logic Pro. I want to make some music. I want to make some sound. So with the Alex Rome video, he had you making a song quickly, or at least parts of a song, pretty quickly with the DAW. And the fact that you could, just like drag notes around to change the key and stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And then he had talked a little bit about, how pop songs are structured and, how you can think about it. Now, that doesn't mean that song you make is going to be very interesting. It probably isn't. But you are making songs, you're making music, and then you can start reflecting on it. It's like, okay, well, why is it not sound that good? And it's also a way into the music theory. So part of it was like, okay, I get this book of guitar chords, and here's a guitar chord where this is like super complicated. And I have to move my hand to that position. I have to press down on exactly the right strings and not touch any of the other strings, and have to do this at speed for a song. And it's like, there's no way I'm going to remember that unless I'm doing it a lot. So it's like, okay, I can understand the concept of that chord. I can understand why that's, those notes together maybe sound good, and I can play around and do chord inversions and all that. In a DAW and software, I don't have to be, my dexterity of my fingers has nothing to do with my ability to make something that makes a sound. I guess that's it. I'm trying to separate all these different things, which I was trying to learn. Guitar, I had to learn all at once. I had to learn all the what is all this terminology the music teacher is telling me, finger positions, calluses, growing out fingernails, clipping fingernails, all that stuff. Trying to figure out where on the fretboard things are, what different tunings are for the guitar. I'm not saying those aren't interesting and useful things. It is a lot to learn for someone who knew nothing about music or music theory, to do all that at once. And I just, I was studying physics or doing computing or, programming or whatever, and I wasn't spending all my time on that. And I came to the conclusion, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to spend an awful lot of time, if I'm going to learn that stuff. And I felt like every time I tried picking up an instrument, like I was starting over again. So I think, if I fire up the DAW each day and just play around a little bit, that I will start learning these things, and if I made like a part of a song each week, whatever it is, or like played around a little bit each day, just for a few minutes, it doesn't have to be long. that I would start learning some music theory and the chords and all. I just get used to it. I get used to using the DAW. I get used to, and if I want to, I can, start saying, okay, well, now I know how to make that in the DAW. Let me try it on a keyboard, whatever. So anyway, that's something I want to do, because I keep saying I want to learn music. But I think the DAW is a good way through. So, and I love electronic music. So anyway, that's one thing I want to do. I actually want to make the next video I make today. I want to just fire up the DAW and mess around with it a little bit. So hopefully that'll be the next video today. Hacking on miniKanren. Okay, so that's another thing I want to do is, at this point, there are things I want to do with miniKanren where miniKanren has some pretty serious limitations in the way search works, for example. Want to try to play around with that, and then also there are a bunch of things like miniKanren, having an interpreter for scheme plus miniKanren, a whole bunch of other stuff. But I want to play around with miniKanren more, and I like to make some videos on that too. I think that'd be fun. I don't think I've ever made a video showing how I actually work on miniKanren. So that would be cool. And I just want to make more progress on miniKanren. There are certainly people working on miniKanren and OKanren and all that. However, there are things that I want to play around with, and basically, for at least some of those things, either I'm going to have to do them, or no one's going to do them probably. I'm still working on, I'm going back to learning the kanji in Japanese. So this is supposedly the big hurdle, other than maybe keigo, the polite speech, but learning the kanji. So this is the Heisig course, or the Heisig book, Remembering the Kanji, volume 1. So I've got an app on my phone. I also got the book through Apple Books or whatever, I have copies of the book, but just so I could have it on my phone, so I can, if I forgot one of the stories that Heisig gives, or want to just refresh my memory. So, I've done this a few times. I got stuck. The flashcards and, carrying around the physical copy of the book, that gets old eventually. So the fact that I can do it on my phone or my iPad, including having the Remembering the Kanji app where I can draw all the strokes and compare it. So that's nice. So I feel like I'm making progress. This is something I do every day. It doesn't have to take long. But I think I'm up to, what am I up to? Let's see. I just finished lesson 11. I've gone through this stuff before, so it's not like these are new, but I'm starting over again, and I'm learning it pretty quickly for the ones I've studied before. Okay, so I got up to 264. So 264 out of 2,200-ish kanji. And then, and I think Heisig's right in that, or at least this is a legitimate way of learning Japanese, in that, it's really annoying to not even be able to read like a paragraph of anything, because there are all these kanji that you don't know. And I find if I don't know how to draw the kanji, I'm not going to remember it. If I can draw it, then it's good. So, this is not learning the readings, this is not learning the pronunciation of the characters or the vocabulary, but it is massively useful, I think, in terms of learning Japanese, to know those kanji. And a lot of people say you don't need to draw it to know how to draw it in the stroke orders. I think it is true that it's less important now because of computers and phones and all smartphones and all that. At the same time, if I'm going to learn the language, I want to be literate. I want to be able to draw, write something. So anyway, I found Duolingo, by the way, to be basically useless. I did that for a while. For Japanese, at least, I didn't find it helpful. Reading books and learning more about programming languages. So that's something that I'm trying to bootstrap myself into doing it more. Yeah, it's one of the things about like YouTube and hacking and all that, computer use, cell phone use, is that, that doesn't necessarily leave much time for reading books. Now, one thing I will say that I resisted for a long time, I am starting to read more on devices like iPhone or on my laptop or on my iPad. I am reading books more. So I resisted that for a long time, but living in a small apartment, my books are already sort of taking over everything. I just literally don't have much space for it. And, traveling around, I just, if I have a big, heavy book, I brought some books with me and all that, but having the book available all the time, there's something to that. So, and also, my eyesight's not the greatest these days. I got cataracts and all sorts of other stuff. So, being able to have the screen that's backlit, being able to read off that, especially off like an iPad. Actually, sometimes it's easier, especially if I have kind of, what's it called, dark mode on. That can be easier than reading on a page for me, depending on the lighting. So that also has helped. So I just read a fiction book that a friend got me on Kindle, and I yesterday I bought three books. There's like the Dafny book by Rustin, and the equational reasoning in Haskell. That's not the name of it, but Richard Byrd had a book. It's like an intro to Haskell book. Let's see. It was like actually a revised version of his second edition of something. What was this called? Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. Let's look at my library. His is called Thinking Functionally with Haskell. Okay. Got that. So Program Proofs is the book for Dafny, which is a verification aware language, which is kind of interesting. And then Deep Learning in Python by Francois Chollet. So just trying to read those books, and it is true that I do most of my programming in Scheme or miniKanren or Racket. However, Dafny I think has some quite interesting ideas in it. The equational reasoning in Haskell is cool, and I would like to have at least a decent reading knowledge of Haskell. I can kind of read Haskell, but I haven't used it enough to really feel comfortable with it. So I'd like to become, there's like Edward Comet Haskell. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about being able to read basic Haskell code and write basic Haskell code. And then the equational reasoning in particular is interesting to me. And then the deep learning stuff, and that's in Python. I've never been a big fan of Python. I know Python 3 is different. And the deep learning stuff is all over the place, and it's, my work now involves that stuff. So, sort of trying to get past my dislike of Python and also learn more about the deep learning stuff. If nothing else, learning the vocabulary. So hopefully I will have a newfound appreciation for Python. What else? Okay, so Artosis, has an ArtosisCasts game a day. They're often quite short. A lot of those videos are 10 minutes or less. So it's a StarCraft BroodWar, StarCraft 1 BroodWar game, and that's fun to watch. And I've just been trying to get back in there. So the thing is, StarCraft 1 is such a hard game mechanically because there's almost no assistant. assistance from the computer, like AI or anything. So if you build a worker, you have to manually click on the worker and tell it to work. It's not going to do it on its own. The hotkeys for buildings, you can't hotkey groups of buildings. So compared to, say, StarCraft 2, it's way, way, way more mechanically difficult. I think my APM now is probably, average APM is probably like 50 or something, actions per minute. I'm really slow. For a top professional, their APM would be over 300, sometimes into 400 range. So I'm literally like 8 times slower than the top pros. And that's me trying to go as fast as I can. Yeah. Now, sometimes my APM like goes over 100, and in StarCraft 2 was much faster. So, like a lot of it's just getting used to it, but even just moving your units around the map is actually super hard in BroodWar. Like, things will get stuck on ramps, dragoons in particular. And so that's such a hard game, and the people who play on ladder have been playing for so long that even the people who are really bad on ladder still have probably played this game for a very long time. So even the bad players of BroodWar tend to be really, quite good. So I'm trying to get over my ladder anxiety to the point where I could play. Like, I definitely got over my ladder anxiety for StarCraft 2. For BroodWar, I'm so bad at it. Like, I really don't want to waste other people's time in a real sense. So it's like, I need to practice against the computer some before I even should go on to ladder, given my experience in the past, where it's like, actually the last game I played on ladder, my opponent like was trying to encourage me. It's like, oh, no, come on, here, I'll stop playing and I'll coach you into what to do. Right. It was like that level of yeah, you really need some work here. So anyway, but I would like to play, some BroodWar each week. So I got a new mouse. Let's see, I've got a little Razer or Rochi mouse. It's very light, so I like it. I like that. It's like I could travel with this. So that's pretty nice. So, and I've got a quiet external keyboard. I think, what is this? This is a SteelSeries Apex 3 TKL 10 keyless. And it's like a membrane keyboard. So, not the clacky type of keyboards that I like, but it's quiet, which is, being quiet's more important in my current setups than having a nice clacking mechanical keyboard. It works fine. Playing with a laptop keyboard for StarCraft, I find is not a real option. Yeah, so I want to get back into that. So I played a little bit, just like campaign, getting back into it and watching the ArtosisCasts games, get some idea of like, okay, so what's this game about? For physics, theoretical minimum books, I think I talked about that before. Yeah, the first one, whoops. Yeah, What You Need to Know to Start Doing Physics by Leonard Susskind and George Hrabowski. Yeah, so part of this, by the way, is I'm trying to figure out how to do all these things. Like, how do I get into this? Because, doesn't mean I'm successful the first time I try, or I've tried reading this book, that theoretical minimum book. This is probably my 4th or 5th time trying to read this book. And I get distracted, or it starts getting hard, or whatever. And then I drop it. I don't want to drop it this time. I actually want to go through. Now, part of it is, let's see, page 112, principle of least action. Page 132, symmetries and conservation laws. I've been learning about some of these things. 152, Hamiltonian mechanics. I think it also has like the Lagrangian stuff, phase space. These are things that I've been learning about. Partial differentiation. Some of this comes up with like machine learning, so it's kind of maybe useful there. But the other part is I just find those ideas like principal, stationary action, or least action really interesting. So I want to try to understand those ideas. I like ideas. So I think what I'm going to do is if I get stuck, I'll use like the Richard Feynman advice. If I get stuck in this book or one of the other books I'm reading, what I'm going to do is just go through and read the rest of it. Read the rest of the book, relatively quickly, just to get some sense of what's in there and what are the ideas and so forth. And then go back and try it again. Try reading it again. And then figure out what things I don't understand, what things I don't know. To just treat it like, there's that saying, a book is not a scroll. In fact, I've even started reading this book backwards. Like that's something I tried. It's like, okay, what if I just read it backwards? And just try to see what I understand, what I don't understand. So, or, another thing is just pick it up and start reading a random chapter. Or at least read the intros to each chapter to see what they're trying to get you to think about. What are the ideas? So, anyway. Now, the last time I read this book, I nerd sniped myself because it started talking about information loss and reversibility. And it's like, okay, well, that got me into reversible computing and all that. But this time I'm not going to let myself get nerd sniped by that. And try. And then also I want to learn about medicinal chemistry and drug discovery and all that. That's, work related. So that's something I really would like to learn more about. A lot of this actually is work related, these things, like learning about deep learning, medicinal chemistry, about new programming ideas and paradigms, all that stuff. Obviously that ties into, computational medicine stuff. So that's what I want to do. I just want to do more stuff. Less time, sort of passively consuming media or whatever, and more time doing some stuff, making things, reading, understanding ideas, playing with ideas. And, here's something I did. So yesterday, trying to learn more about Dafny, I installed Visual Studio. I tried getting Dafny set up with Emacs, with Melpa and all that, and that was just a pain, and apparently just works better with Visual Studio and Visual Studio plugins. So downloaded Visual Studio, installed the Dafny plugin, grabbed a repo that had Dafny code, loaded it up, I installed Dafny, and already had Z3 installed, and just started playing around with that a little bit. So, there we go. Get me out of some of my old habits. Instead of Emacs, I have to learn Visual Studio. So that's good. All these things I've said that I wanted to do or learn, I'm like, well, why am I waiting? It also reminds me of, Ken Atchity. I think I've talked about before. I like a lot of his thoughts on doing things, and his motto is never wait. Don't wait, never wait. So that's one of the things I've been trying to practice more. It's like, oh, here's a book. I've wanted to read this book for a long time. Or, oh yeah, that theoretical minimum book. Actually, theoretical minimum, that's a good example of a book I tried to read on Kindle, and the Kindle version's so bad that I just got it on paper again. That is a terrible book to read on the Kindle. A lot of the physics books that have lots of equations and figures and stuff, they look so ugly. Or was that Roger Penrose, that thick book on like all the physics of the universe or whatever? I forget what it's called. But I've had physical copies of that, and I also got the Kindle version, so I didn't have to lug around this giant thing. The Kindle version's like worthless. In fact, they even mix up some of the figures in it. So sometimes paper is best. I mean, a PDF would solve that, but they don't. I guess they don't roll that way. So I was thinking, well, yeah, I do want to try to read this book. I do want to try to understand this physics. So I was like, well, why not just order another copy? So I did. And why not start reading it? Just read a little bit. So that's what I'm trying to do. Why wait? It's like, well, why not install Visual Studio? Or I've been saying I want to learn Dafny for a while. Okay, well, what if I just took a step now? What's the smallest step I could take? Read the Dafny tutorial. What's the next smallest step I can take? Install Dafny and run a little program. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's all. Okay, well, I hope to make a video with my DAW. Don't expect much. That's fine. Maybe by the end of 2025, I'll have figured out what a time signature is. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.